CMMI for large organizations. I hear that a lot. Maybe you hear that. I don't believe everything I hear, and I think a little better definition would be using large organization approach to process improvement in a small organization creates an enormous burden. So things like creating big processes that identify every single detail when small organizations actually have good communication. There are some approaches that need to be taken for small organizations that will work better. So the presentation I'm doing will be broken into really 4 different areas. I want to talk a little bit about what are my general hints for success based on any size organization. So I'd like to reinforce some things you maybe have already heard that are generally available and common knowledge for approaching process improvement. I'd like to address the environmental parameters that are important that you'll see later as identify some of them as being barriers or even advantages. And then 20 strategies that work, that I've seen work and have used in small organizations. What is small? I tend to like to use the Software Engineering Institute's definition, but I found a few other interesting definitions. You know, when process improvement maybe is the budget is more than 10% of the operating budget, that might be a good indicator that you're going to deal with some burden on cost. Small, 76 to 250, very small being 26 to 75, and ultra small, 1 to 25. So I haven't heard ultra small before, but it's one of the definitions. The SEI tends to treat companies, organizations, and projects with a different number. So generally speaking, an organization would be the scope that you would do an appraisal on. So less than 50, generally speaking, would be a small organization. And of course, the Small Business Administration considers less than 500 to be a small company. So is CMMI too burdensome? I know that I do hear organizations kind of turning away thinking that we can't do this. There are other options for us. We'll take those other options. And I think that there are other alternatives, but I think the value is there. And I think it's important, again, not to believe everything you hear, but to go and investigate and understand for yourself what the values are. In recent years, the number of appraisals being done in small organizations has increased. My friend Henry Schneider of Process and Product Quality Consulting has shared this slide with me, and I think it's interesting to show how over the last couple of years we've seen an increase in the number of appraisals that are performed on less than 50 individuals in the organization. So there are organizations out there doing it and having success. I've seen it with my own eyes. A couple things I want to talk about just as kind of to substantiate the effort that you take. Clearly, Deming made it clear we need to define what we do, and we need to measure and manage, and we can't measure until we define, and we can't manage until we measure. And these are some key points. Any of the improvement methodologies that you look at will all kind of be based on this: define, measure, manage, improve. And it's important to understand that. We're really not going anywhere until we at least buckle down and at least in a simplistic way address these approaches. Sometimes I sit with some folks that are kind of resistant, and I walk through the practices saying, okay, well, you know, show me which ones you think we don't need. And sometimes we get into a couple that look like, well, why do we need to do this one? And then once you explain it and you understand the risks of not performing certain practices, it gets a little clearer. Now, there's 430-some practices in the CMMI, so there's a lot of them in there all the way through level 5. I think generally if you're starting out and you don't have a good understanding of the model, then we're only talking about 128 practices at level 2. But I think if you look at project management and engineering and support and process management, and you look at the contents of these requirements, where are things that you don't need to do? And that's really my point. I think we need to understand that these are things that are going to help us and reduce risk. If you're familiar with Stephen Covey's teachings, I tend to like to think of prioritization in the way that he tends to teach that. You know, quadrant 1 being the firefighting, the urgent and important areas where we spend a lot of our time, and quadrant 2 being the quality time. And you know, quadrant 3 we got to stay out of there, and quadrant 4 is obvious, we don't go there. But we want to spend our time on in quadrant 2 as much as we can, and that's really where process improvement is. As we get our free time and some slack time, we go there and we try to improve the way we do things so that we can basically dig our way out of quadrant 1. A lot of us are spending time in quadrant 1 and having trouble getting out, and again, we have to budget that time in quadrant 2. So a couple hints that I have for success. First, I start with a list of don'ts. These are just things that if I see it, I'll say, watch out. First of all, don't give up. If you give up, you have wasted, of course, the initial work that you did. It is not going to be as difficult down the road as it is starting out. So don't give up. Hang in there. You'll see some early wins, hopefully. And we don't want to start with a grassroots strategy. It's important. You've heard this before. You know, start with the top-level management. Make sure you've got that buy-in first. I've seen some mistakes there. Don't over-design the process. This is a very common mistake, is to try to satisfy every if-then, maybe, and make a beautiful masterpiece here, where we really just need to take incremental steps and try something small first and make it work. Don't take on too much at one time. Similar thing to watch for. Don't misuse metrics. In a small organization, I'll mention later, it's kind of hard to hide, but we don't want to blame the people. The process is basically to blame. I have another presentation I do where I actually quote, you know, Toyota, and then I grabbed a claim off of a website from a consulting company. Toyota basically says, if I can get it right, something like, we experience great results with average people and a great process. And that clashes with something else I found on a website that said, we hire great people and use a mediocre process and achieve great results. And, you know, I think I would like to see that. I don't know how well that would sustain. But I think the important thing here is the focus is on the process, and we know that people generally want to do a great job, and Deming preached on that too. Don't put training materials in the process descriptions and procedures. We're trying to put just the information that people really need in the process descriptions and in the requirements. This is going to be the place where they reference, how do I do my work? And so once you're trained, you tend not to need that information in there. I see this a lot of little tidbits and examples are in the procedures. We really don't want to do that. We want to keep that separate and make the procedures as lean as we can. So I'm going to go into a couple of things that I do endorse very strongly. First of all, ensure sponsor fully understands the commitment. Many times they don't, really. A lot of times I find that the sponsor, you know, a competitor has reached level 3, so now we need to do that. They don't know what it takes, and it's very, very important to sit down with a knowledgeable CMMI trained individual and fill them in on what their role is and what they're committing the organization to, so that there's no, what we're trying to avoid here is a false start. So we want to align the improvements with business goals.